I'm glad you're here. And it's not only you, we also have Osmium Zwelu. Hope I pronounced that right.
Butchered it.
But for now, it's just us. So let's get to it. Our topic tonight is how to deal with cancel culture, specifically wokeism in your work and personal life. For some context, Oz has worked in HR. He's been the chubby HR lady with his office covered in papers, smelling of lotion, whatever fast food he had the day before. So Oz, let's start with this question. Why does it take 2 days for my PTO to get approved? Can't be that hard, right?
Because if I put in effort, people would expect effort in the future, and that would clash with my ability to schedule blue hair dye appointments.
Fair enough. That's the only right answer I'll take. Here's the real question. Are you willing to get canceled? Are you willing to get canceled, fired, lose your job and acquaintances for your beliefs?
You know, it's actually funny, you a little slip up there, but it's kind of the case. Are you willing to get canceled so you don't get cancer? Yeah, I think so. I think the answer really, it just depends. There's so many issues right now that people will cancel you over, and not all of them are worth getting canceled over. For example, there was a time where I had to do an investigation on some employees and some customers, and the customer had described this employee who was up to some shady business as a dark-haired, brown-skinned Middle Eastern person. Okay, that was the description. They didn't know their name, whatever. And the employee that they reported that to was ultimately triggered by the racist description. I could have made an issue of it and been like, no, you're being a snowflake and get over it. But it just didn't serve anything at that point, right? I wasn't going to change their mind by doing so. But if I'd made a fuss about it, it's possible they could have complained up the appropriate chains and gotten me into some hot water. So is that something I'm willing to throw down on? No, that would be stupid. I think there is a matter of picking your battles. But if somebody came up to me and was like, hey, so in fact, this almost happened, and it was actually a pretty fortunate dodge, but they were, hey, as a HR person, we should support this gay pride parade happening in our city. All the other districts are doing this. So what do you think? It was like I think like the next day or something, there was that Orlando nightclub shooting where there were a bunch of gay people got shot. Because of that, the whole company said, yeah, we're not going to this pride parade. All of it's canceled because we don't want to put our people in jeopardy. So I didn't have to, but I was willing to say like, no, I can't support this. That's not something that I can organize. Sorry, but that's against my convictions. I think there are points in which you are having to tell lies. And if you are telling lies, then you are approaching a point of deep moral character compromise. And there's something to be said about outright lying and carefully omitting or being careful not to be complicit. I think those are some different things.
The question is, how do we have discernment to decide, all right, we're not going to be a snowflake about someone saying someone has brown skin or describing a character attribute to, I don't want to throw the gay pride parade. I don't feel comfortable with that. I'm a Christian. Do I tell people that's the reason why?
I think they're going to demand a reason why. And the answer is you're not going to be able to give them a satisfactory reason why if you're lying. Even if you come up with all of these most politically correct reasons for it, you might be able to persuade them otherwise. Wokeism is pretty much a one-way street. And if you're not going that direction, if you're in the opposition, it doesn't really matter your reasons why. You're probably going to get canned for it. So you better stick to your convictions and choose a good reason why. Otherwise, you're potentially going to get canned anyways. And you're going to be really harming your witness and essentially denying elements of the faith, which is never a good plan.
Okay, so I have to ask you this. Since you did work in HR is just there to protect the employer, not the employee, right?
Yeah, essentially. You will find in certain capacities, there is some differences where you might have a little bit better for the employee circumstances. But at the end of the day, they're really there to protect the employer. They're like law enforcement, right? You don't really want to deal with them if you don't have to, because there's no upside for you. You're never going to get these big kudos accolades. Maybe if you can ingratiate yourself with them, you can get some extra PTO approved in 1 day rather than 2 days, but it's never worth it. My general policy with HR, even being an HR person in part of my career, has been not deal with them as much as possible, and it tends to work out better that way. And if you do have to deal with them, there are easy ways to deal with it quickly and in a way that makes their life simple so they don't have to remember you. That's probably the better way to go about it.
So this podcast is about navigating cancel culture. Let's say I do say an off-color joke and I get sent to HR. What do I do? Should I deny it? Should I just come clean and admit it? How do I protect myself as an employee?
Part of it is how important is it for you to protect yourself? There was a circumstance where, this is a different capacity, where I was managing people. I had told an employee that he needed to get his shit together or he was going to get fired. Pretty much quote, that was what I said. In the particular company I was working for, it was definitely snowflake culture run around. He was totally shocked by it and went around and told everyone else on the team that I had, quote, cussed him out. It made its way up to HR, who then made its way to my manager. That manager came and spoke with me. Hey, did you say this? My answer was, yeah, I said it, but I would like to explain the context as to the reasons why. I gave my side of the situation. One, I was really, really good at my job, and so they weren't out to find a reason to get rid of me. So that's part of it. If you want good job protection, be super useful and be indispensable, and you will be surprised at how much grace you get. But at the end of the day, said, well, you probably could have gotten around to saying that in a way that was more constructive, so don't do that again, was essentially what it amounted to. So I think there was a lot of preliminary things where I had built a good relationship with my manager. I had a good reputation for having good work done. And it wasn't like this employee was, some special, awesome employee who I just singled out. I was able to show that this was not the first conversation I had with the employee, or that their manager had with them, or their manager's manager had with them. So it was a situation where I had consciously ahead of time thought things through and acted in such a way that if I did have to act a little bit off color, people weren't going to totally lose their minds over it.
Okay, I'm going to practice my active listening here. So if I get in trouble for something, my best recourse is to have already built these relationships with my managers and to be indispensable. Someone that, if you want to fire me, you can, but you got to replace me with 2 people.
Yes. And I would say that saying I didn't say that is only going to get you in worse trouble, because the odds are really good. They're either not going to believe you and they're going to side with the person who's making up, saying the story. It's definitely, I think, going to backfire if you say I didn't say it, unless you truly did. If you did say it, you should be thinking, what was the purpose of having said it? So in this particular case, this employee I had talked with personally twice about this particular behavior that he was doing. His manager had spoken with him twice about it. The manager above that manager had spoken with him like 3 times about it. We were just sick of it, and the message wasn't getting through. And this guy was like right on the cusp of getting fired anyways. He was actually a good guy. He just could not get his stuff together. And so I had this very direct conversation with him to try and shake him out of it. So it wasn't just coming out of some sort of fly off the handle, I was pissed at this guy. It was actually to try and wake him up and get him to pay attention. And that's what I explained to my supervisor. And they actually understood that. And they're like, well, your means were maybe not appropriate, but at least the intentions were good. And intentions can get you a long ways.
Looks like we have Levi here. You there, Levi?
Yo, what up, bro?
So you're in salesman culture, and it's pretty harsh in salesman culture, right? I mean, you can basically say whatever you want as long as you're making sales. They don't care. At least that's what I've seen.
Yeah. You can. You'll get ribbing from the other salespeople. There is one of the more dominant guys in our sales is on the brink of going woke. He does this weird thing where he likes playing devil's advocate. Doesn't matter what the position is. As soon as somebody asserts a position, he argues the opposite pretty voraciously, and he just enjoys it. He's like, I don't even agree with what I'm saying. I just like arguing the opposite. He brings up some good points in his arguments too. So it's interesting. There's a lot of ribbing, and as long as you're getting sales done, like you were saying, your job's secure.
So then let me ask you this question. What beliefs are you unwilling to keep quiet about, either in your work life, your personal life, both?
Not many, honestly. Usually don't come right out and say something. There's a lot of preliminary conversations before I'll actually talk about something. Red pill, I'll kind of drop some subtle questions or things that I find true that are most people would agree with to see if they would agree with gender dynamics, things like that. In regards to the gospel, it's easy to talk about when I'm trying to lead the conversation or steer the conversation, or there's an easy spot to interject into. Somebody talks about belief. I'm like, okay, what do you believe? And so I kind of try to play the salesman. I'm working on connecting from the wants, needs analysis to the how the gospel meets that.
Same question for you, Oz. What beliefs are you unwilling to keep quiet about in your personal and in your work life?
When I think about this, the unwilling to keep quiet about is kind of the clincher. Does that mean I'm going to go around and take these beliefs and try and broadcast them to every passerby? Probably not. This is a situation where I've always found it to be not only useful, but also just a better use of time to talk to people who are interested in having conversations about the beliefs. Certain things like there is a God, atheism is crap, feminism is cancer, those sort of things. Like, yeah, I'm totally willing to have those conversations, and I'm likely to have those conversations with most people that I get into conversation with. That's not to say that, hi, I just met this barista, and so now I'm going to tell her all the reasons why, her feminist professor is full of it. No, of course not. That's kind of a different situation. Thinking about what beliefs am I unwilling to keep silent about? I'm willing to put a lid on it for most things, especially if somebody says there's a big paycheck at hand. I'm much more cautious about the idea of denying anything. Denying truth is a whole different animal. Even when you look in the Gospels where Jesus commands his disciples to go out into the different neighboring villages, they don't want to hear what they have to say, to kick the dust off your sandals and move on. So I think that's a very unpopular thing today for evangelicals, especially, to promote. But if somebody's not hearing you out, you don't need to keep berating them with that anyways. I don't look for just every willing ear to pass these things on to. Pearls before swine sort of idea. Really, when you find that more people are you're talking with are actually interested in what you have to say. The conversations are a better use of your time, which you should be a steward of. They're a better use of their time and interest, and more likely to get through to them in some way. In some part, I wait for those opportunities.
Let's say you're a college kid, 21, you're in class. Are you going to take the Ben Shapiro method of just keeping quiet, writing the papers your professors want you to write, being a good little boy and having no opinions? Or are you going to make your opinions known and fail the class? You're going to get fired over your opinions if it comes up to it.
Here's the thing about that is, one, I think Ben Shapiro gets this rap for being this really brave guy going out there and debating people on cultures while meanwhile he's like playing his $1 million violin. It doesn't take that much bravery when you have your paycheck coming in no matter what. In fact, you're getting paid to do those things. Not to say that he's a coward, but man, this guy gets a bigger rap than he deserves on that front. Second, the idea of just keeping your mouth shut and passing. If that's your plan, just don't go to college. If you're going to college, go for something useful, engineering degree or something where you are actually going to put that into practice. But college is generally useless at this point, and anybody wasting their time and money on that really needs to be considering if that's a worthwhile investment. If you get into the trades, you will get paid to learn much more useful skills and get paid much better than the vast majority of people coming out of college. And yeah, people want to turn their noses up at the idea of the trades. They're idiots, and you don't want to be one of them.
Levi, you're trying to start a company right now, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to your
Correct.
company, are you going to do any sort of advertising as this is a Christian company? Are you going to have any of your beliefs advertised along with the company, or is it just going to strictly be what you're selling?
No, it's going to be way polarizing, man. It's definitely going to be super broadcasting the gospel. Honestly, it's geared towards guys exactly like me. But I also know that there's a lot of guys out there that are tired of the pussification of the American male. So I'm also appealing to those guys and showing them you can be a dude that's on fire for God, sick of culture. You can still be manly as hell and polarizing. That's my niche that I'm going into. I purposely enjoy being polarizing to people to either get them on the fence or off the fence. On the fence is the wrong way. On one side of the
other.
fence.
Yeah.
On one side of the fence. Yeah, as quickly as possible. Same question to you. I don't know if you're just directing this whole thing or you'd be willing to answer the question.
I forget what the law of power is, but it basically comes down to act as others, but think as you want. I believe in doing that at work when you're getting your paycheck. Because I can get fired from this job and get another one. Then I'll basically have to play the same woke game, right? So what's the difference between just being quiet at one job and being quiet at the other? You could argue I could start my own company. You'd have an argument there, but I'm getting paid to do my job, not to have opinions. But I'm like you when it comes to my personal life. I want to be polarizing. I want people to know what I believe, and I want either you to respect me for it or to hate me for it. But at least you have a position on me. I don't want to be lukewarm to anyone.
So let me push on that just a little bit, because I want to qualify something of what I said before. It's not that polarization doesn't have its place. I could be a very polarizing person if my posts show anything. And I do that in my personal life as well. The trouble is you can't do that to everyone. You don't have the energy, nor should you spend that kind of energy on everyone. If there's somebody that you see some sort of spark in that you think maybe this person's worth engaging with in some way, then I think that's the point in which, yeah, you want to start kind of pushing some boundaries. You want to start pushing their buttons a little bit and polarize and see what's going on. That's totally fine. It totally makes sense. And you can probably guess I'm a big proponent of you need to protect your time, because your time is a non-renewable resource. And polarizing helps you do that, because if you are spending time on somebody, trying to get to know them, and 6 months down the road, you haven't really touched into those touchy issues yet. And so then finally you do, and they're completely on the opposite side and don't want to hear you out and are going to cast you into the fires of damnation anyways. Well, you just blew 6 months getting to know this person. A lot of people aren't even worth getting to know to begin with. Sounds harsh, but I live in a very liberal area, and let's just say the zombie effect is real. You're very unlikely to get very far with a lot of these people anyways. That is the reality we live in. There can be liability associated with that in the sense of, yeah, you go and polarize the wrong person, and it turns out they have connections to somebody at your work anyways and can get you in hot water. And that depends on the nature of your work. Often the risk, so to speak, is not worth whatever potential upside there can be, especially since more than likely you're going to be wasting your time and it's going to be a time not well spent.
I have basically that same attitude. Yeah.
I want to go back a little bit. So we were talking about, you get in hot water with HR at work, or how do you protect yourself? What I said before, backing up, be cautious about the way you interact with your boss, be indispensable, be intentional about cultivating some reasonable doubt around yourself. So that way, if you do end up stepping on some toes, people are going to attribute it to faux pas, not that you had some sort of malice. Yeah, that's all important. It's only one small piece of it. I think the more important thing is be really resilient in how you choose to live your life and not overextend yourself to the point where you're depending on your job. And I see a lot of people do this. I've been very intentional about never getting too dependent on one stream of income. Even if it is only one stream of income, have deep enough pockets, a deep enough war chest that you can say F you and walk away from it. That's been a very important part of my ongoing philosophy. And that gives me, a lot of peace. Two, it gives me the freedom to say, no, I'm not going to host your pride parade or whatever else is silly that is being asked of me. And if they were to can me, then yeah, that would suck in the sense that I would have to go look for other work. But if they were going to can me over something like that, odds are good I really wasn't going to want to be there for very long anyways.
Is there ever a situation where you guys would pretend to have the opposite views? I mean, we could take this to the extreme and say you're surrounded by a certain type of protester that wants you to say certain words. Will you do it?
No.
Depends, not seriously, but to argue a counterpoint, if somebody's not agreeing with me, sometimes I'll take their side and then I'll argue it to a ridiculous degree, just kind of play it out. Successful in pointing out the flaw in their logic, because I played out to the point where I'm like, okay, now do you see your fallacy? Fun, but probably ineffective. I do it very few and far between, and usually when I do it, it's almost in a facetious manner.
We're all Christians here. We have to think about balancing our witness with the polarization that we're talking about here. So a Bible verse that comes to
Balancing your
mind.
witness. I like that phrase. Dude, that's so relevant.
First verse that comes to mind is 1 Corinthians 8 through 11. Food will not commend us to God. We are no worse off if we do not eat, and no better off if we do. But take care that this right of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block to the weak. For if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will he not be encouraged if his conscience is weak to eat the food offered to idols? In the context I see this is we have to balance our witness. We can do certain things. We can say certain things. But is it always wise to?
I don't think the church in America, to broaden this out a little bit, I don't think the problem is they haven't been concerned enough about their witness. Quite the opposite, in fact. All of this masquerading of concern about witness is an excuse to be a bunch of cowardly pussies and actually water down the gospel. And their witness is, we don't actually believe anything in this book, but we like our club. I think when a lot of people say, oh, what about your Christian witness? What they're saying is, hey, you know what? Don't you also not believe what the Bible actually says? And so shouldn't we all just continue to pretend like we believe parts of it and not others? And that would be really great. So you should be really careful about your Christian witness, because things could become inconvenient. They might actually think you're a serious Christian.
So me and Prax have been talking about this lately, and it comes down to being above reproach. Is that practical? Was Jesus above reproach?
Yeah, I was going to say reproached by who? If you're
Right.
not being reproached by your enemies, Christ's enemies, then you're probably not doing things well.
You've heard that before, right? Pastor, another Christian, usually a soy boy, will tell you, oh, we have to be above reproach. Well, Jesus was reproached by the Pharisees.
Yeah, and the Roman governing authorities, and the list goes on. I mean, he also said, if you're getting beaten in my name, it's a blessing. Well, people who are above reproach in the sense they're not pissing anyone off are not getting beaten by anyone either.
What does that mean? How do we stay, quote unquote, above reproach, but be biblical? Is it we can only be reproached by things that are in the Bible?
You ought not be found a hypocrite. If you are saying, I believe the Bible and I'm following it, you had better be living in accordance with that. And I'm not even necessarily saying cultural expectations, because people import all kinds of meanings of what that is. Oh, well, you say you believe the Bible, but you also drink alcohol. Well, okay, I don't believe that alcohol forbids that. So there's a consistency there. So what your professed view of that is, you should be living in consistency with it. And if somebody finds you inconsistent, they ought to reproach you. Hey, maybe you'll have a good conversation, explain why you actually are being faithful, and you can explain to them, well, the Bible doesn't actually say that. That's a cultural artifact that is commonly misunderstood. Maybe that happens. I'm much more concerned about reproach from God than I am about reproach from man. That said, I think that means you shouldn't be a hypocrite. And if somebody is calling you out on that, you had better have a good reason for why it is that you are deviating from the cultural expectation. So one of the Episcopalian denominations recently ordained their first transgender bishop, I believe. I'm sure there's probably somebody somewhere along the lines who said, well, we wouldn't want the reproach of our culture because we wouldn't want to damage our witness. We want to be loving. All the meanwhile, completely eviscerating the worldview of Scripture and the integrity of God's command. Who are you trying to be above reproach for? And in that case, I think they chose very poorly.
Okay, you heard it. So according to Oz, you are able to fashion a whip and beat others as long as you are above reproach.
Man, I wish that was the case. Things would be so much more simple. Thunderdome it out, guys.
Okay.
Well, people say, I love how people say, like, well, what would Jesus do? Within the realm of possibilities includes the whip and the flipping over tables in the temple. So
Yeah, they seem to avoid that one conveniently. I've never heard a sermon how to have godly anger or how to display godly anger or justice or any of those things. It's unfortunate.
So has
Yeah.
wokeism infected your guys' church yet, or is it just every single church that I've been to so far?
Every single church.
Being somewhat careful about these terms, wokeism is particular enough that there are churches that are resisting that writ large. For example, my church has explicitly denounced critical race theory as a false gospel, for example, in over and against what's happening in like the SBC and some other places. I would say there is a vocal opposition to the wide swath of wokeism. That being said, the fertile ground that has been the American consciousness for the last century that wokeism took root in is present in every church. Just about, I would say every church that I've ever been a part of or been made known to be a part in this area and beyond. There's a big presuppositional question of why did wokeism even get into the church this far? And a lot of churches who think that, well, that could never happen here are way closer than they think, because a lot of their presuppositions that they hold actually do not forbid the idea of a lot of the wokeism coming down the pipe. For example, I often say in my group of friends and acquaintances that complementarianism is not enough. Complementarianism is a doctrine for loser to begin with. So it was meant to be a recapturing of biblical doctrine of patriarchy, but because patriarchy sounds mean to feminists, we're going to call it complementarianism. So from the very outset, from the definition, you had compromise. So you have a bunch of churches going around right now who will unequivocally say, the Bible tells us there's men and women and there's no other genders. It's just man and God made woman, and that's all there is. And they will not be able to tell you the distinctions between those two genders beyond, well, I guess the husband's the tiebreaker and should be the only one preaching from the pulpit. It's kind of where it stops. If that's the whole counsel of God on gender, you've got a huge problem, because you're out there saying, hey, there's only two genders, but I'm not really going to actually talk about what that means.
Okay, two things. First, can you just say the word loser so I can sub it out for the word
Loser.
Wait. Are we seriously subbing out?
Yeah, bro.
Here I am trying to,
Wait.
make sure my witness isn't being damaged by using invective language, and he's trying to censor me.
I'm protecting your witness. You're welcome.
I thought we were trying to be polarizing here.
Okay, let me see. Hold on, I'm gonna try and say. I'm just trying to say the clip
wokeism.
so he has a very clean clip to work with.
Okay.
Complementarianism is a doctrine for losers.
What about, are they involved in that too, or is it just losers?
I would say that they probably had a hand in making that happen.
So I'm all for being polarizing, but if we get this YouTube video removed, not polarizing anyone, is it?
Hey,
Polarizing the YouTube devs.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Well, you bring up a good point. Wokeism isn't just the critical race theory. It's in our churches in the egalitarianism versus complementarianism, right?
I want to get back on the idea. So we're talking about cancel culture, and cancel culture, I would say, is one of the supporting elements of wokeism, but wokeism is really a religious thing. So I don't want to conflate things that are not necessarily a part of it. So I think that evangelicalism has adopted a lot of the presuppositional elements that created the foundation on which wokeism could be created, but I don't necessarily think that's the same thing as having accepted wokeism to begin with. Again, back to the idea of egalitarianism. Critical race theory is premise of you have different races that have different power structures, and there's inequity in those power structures. We need to militate to equalize those disparities. The church has already accepted the idea of there's only one human race. Okay. That is just so, one, biologically and historically and biblically naive that it's not Christian. It doesn't make any sense at all, even in light of Paul's own comments when he talks about like Cretans being lazy glutton. That's a wide brush of an entire ethnic group. Paul seems totally comfortable saying that. Take out Cretan and insert any other people group that's present today, and you will have churches freak out. That is one thing that I would just say, that the church has already assumed an egalitarianism of ethnicity that does not actually allow for any sort of realistic response to critical race theory, because it's not even biblical. Those are the type of presuppositional groundwork things that the church has already accepted that allow wokeism to take root so easily.
Well said. Levi, I've got a question for you. Let's say you meet a woman. She's perfect, 22. She's got a dump truck, Christian, checks off all the boxes.
Hold on. I just need to clarify, because for different guys, this actually might be different answers, but are we hoping a real dump truck or the proverbial dump truck? Because either one of those could be a positive, or both.
Let's go with the
Is this a
proverbial
double
dump truck.
entendre? Is it
She checks off all your boxes. She's great. You like her a lot. And she goes, Levi, I agree with everything you say, but you just can't share it with my dad. My dad's a liberal. He'll hate you, and I want my dad to like you. You go to dinner with her dad and he starts spouting off some nonsense. You gonna keep your mouth shut?
No, not necessarily. I think there's a perfectly palatable way to push back on somebody's beliefs while not being confrontational. One goal I think that needs to happen is people need to be able to have conversations where each party disagrees on something without everybody freaking out and shutting down the conversation and just getting angry at each other. Depending on how you frame your assertions, you either come across as confrontational or he could come out with mad respect for you because you actually voice your opinions in a way that's respectable.
Bro, you're from the West Coast. Come on, you've met people that can't handle other opinions.
Yeah, I definitely have. Unfortunately, most of those people are in the context of buying a car from me. So I usually steer away from those conversations because it's a really quick rapport killer.
But we're talking about a dump truck here. Are you gonna keep your mouth shut?
Yeah, I guess in that regard, you could say it's a little bit more on the line. In the end, if you have enough rapport built with somebody, you can say things that are completely disagreeable to them. In my experience so far, you can say things that are disagreeable and not be confrontational. You guys can both come out more educated about the other's position. And who knows, you might even change your own position on something.
Okay, same question for you. You're a single guy, 10 out of 10. But her dad isn't just confrontational. He wants to know what your beliefs are.
There's a good question involved here, which is how much is this guy going to be a consistent element of your life? Now, the answer is always going to be more than you bargained for if it's your girlfriend's dad who you're going to potentially marry. I think there's a weighing involved. Does this person live out of state or in another country, or are you going to see them every weekend? If it's somebody who has a deep connection with their family and daughter still looks to him for all these things, she's probably not a 10 out of 10 when it comes to her worldview, because if she can't spot the crazy, then she's probably not evaluating you correctly. She's got the fifis going crazy, and you're probably not going to have a good time if you pursue that further. So I think it says a lot more about her than it does about him at that point. That said, if he's somebody who's going to be more at a distance, she understands that he has these crazy left-wing views that are antithetical to her beliefs and all that. She just wants you to play nice with dad. Kind of to Levi's point, I think you can have a very frank conversation about your beliefs, but in a way that is, one, respectful, and two, in a way that is still to the point. Dad gets mogged on too, and that's okay. He needs to know who the new alpha is. Fine.
So for single guys out there, should they be avoiding women that have families that are woke, or is that something that you can navigate?
Totally say it depends on how close to her family and how she evaluates them. Like if she views her family and is just like, they are the best thing since sliced bread, they're amazing, everything is perfect about them, I just so want you to be an addition to that, and she seems totally ignorant about the differences that you're seeing there, that's a big red flag to me, because it means that her own worldview is either way different than yours and you have a problem, or she doesn't see the conflict that will necessarily ensue down the road. If they have different visions of what the world is and what justice looks like, and how, that's going to bleed over to things like, how do you raise your kids? Do you spank them or not? How do you spend the holidays? Do you actually celebrate holidays? The list goes on. Oh my gosh, your child, you gave him a stereotypically male name. Isn't that going to predispose him to, assume in a gender that might be a conformity to cultural expectations? I think he might be abusive. I seriously though, I mean, I see people run into that meat grinder frequently because they didn't select these things carefully. There's no woman out there who is such a snowflake that's so special and rare unicorn that's worth putting up with that crap for the rest of your life.
But Levi lives in the West Coast. I mean, how much?
So do I. Yeah. So do I. I mean, like, they're out there. And the thing too is, like, we're big in the red pill area about AWOL. All women are like that, right? That said, that is expressed to various degrees. And there are women out there who are quite right wing, who are dying just as much as guys are out here. They just have the luxury of having the ability to have higher standards. You can find them out there. They are difficult. They're going to expect a lot. When you encounter those, it's worth it, especially since there's this naivety that happens in the heartland and in red states. And I've traveled to enough of them and spoken with enough people from there to see they think that can't happen there. And they're totally delusional. I remember I was touring Idaho at one point. We went on a big road trip through there, stayed at some churches, stayed with a great couple. Everyone we talked to, it seemed to be like, oh, you're from the coast. Yeah, it's really crazy over there. Huh? It's a good thing that'll never happen here. And then you look at what's happening in Boise and Coeur d'Alene and other places years later, and it's coming down the pipe hot and heavy for them, but they're not as prepared for it because they've been out of the battle for a long time. With respect to our listeners that are in those states, you guys don't know what it's like to live under the boot of leftist crap like this. If you find a girl who has lived under that and is opposed to it, she's probably pretty well seasoned to that. I would say that the pickings are hard, but what you do find, if they are true to it, are going to be a lot more convicted to that point.
I'm going to give some actionable advice on this. And that's, if you're a young man on the West Coast, spin a bunch of plates, be polarizing with your dad. Who cares? You lose one plate, spin up another one. Be polarizing with her dad. Keep doing it until you can find someone that'll respect you for it. It's just a numbers game.
Yeah, and I mean, I want guys to hear me out too. If you're on the West Coast, don't stay here. I don't think you're stuck here. So many guys do. I have a good friend of mine who just has not seemed to realize that he can actually pick up and leave and go somewhere more promising. I just want guys to know that the quote unquote promised land comes with its own issues as well. And one of those is there's this blind spot when it comes to how real these pressing issues really are.
There's trade-offs in everything. The car industry has really opened my eyes to, if somebody wants something for a certain price with a certain amount of miles with a bunch of bells and whistles, you have to compromise on one of those because that car doesn't exist. You're looking for a unicorn. Right now, I am deciding to stay on the West Coast. Depending how the political climate goes, if it keeps going south the way it has been, there's a really good chance I'm gonna get a Russia, Miami, or I don't know, Texas. One of the more conservative states, maybe even Idaho. There's a pastor out there that I really admire. For me, I'm deciding to stay here at this moment. So you have to figure out ways to create more opportunities. It's not my mission to find a woman, but part of my mission is to have a family, which involves a woman. Something I'm actually starting to open my mind up to in the last 2 or 3 days is online dating. Before, I've been absolutely not a fan of it because you don't have a chance to give your personality. I guess the reason I started thinking this way is because in my everyday life, even with all the activities I do and people I see, I still only see maybe 1 or 2 viable women worth approaching a week. I don't know if those women are Christian, so I'm just trying to expand my options and leverage my time in a way where I can start getting some plates.
As someone that's moved from California to the Midwest, it's worth it. If you can leave California, leave California. There's no reason to stay. Plenty of jobs out here. There's plenty of jobs everywhere. Go to the South. Go anywhere else but California while you still can.
And this is an abundance mentality that expands beyond the women thing, right? I've moved around enough times for various reasons, and there's always more people. There's always more job opportunities. There's always going to be that next thing. Until there's not, I think California is heading the way to the point where whatever opportunity you might see there is probably not worth all the other crap you have to put up with. I would just second that. And I'm on the coast at the moment, but I've got my own plans to make my way out. You got to think about these things too in long-term trajectory. One thing to say, yeah, I can live here. There's some stuff I have to put up with. Okay. Is that stuff going to be better or worse 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now? Is there any reason to believe that those trends are going to reverse? Have you seen any indication of that? When you look at demographic shift happening in this country, red states are generally getting redder, blue states are generally getting bluer because people are sorting themselves out into like-minded ideology. And you don't want to be essentially caught behind enemy lines 20 years from now with your family. Hey, guess what? The good gettings are already gotten by people who've already left and gotten the hell out of there when they had the opportunity. I'm a big proponent of, if you don't like it, leave it.
That's similar advice to what you give to singles when it comes to finding a woman, right? If you can't find a woman on the West Coast, then move somewhere else. Why not?
Right. I mean, and it's a huge world, however many billions of people are there. And to think that you have to be looking in this one area is just really, really limited. Again, time is your non-renewable resource. You aren't getting more of it. And it's not that this is all about finding a woman or anything like that, but if it's part of your mission to have a family, you're going to need one along the way at some point. So you should probably be thinking about that and taking that into account with your timelines. The idea that, oh, well, I'm going to be away from my people I grew up with and my family and all that. Yeah, that might suck, but you have to think about, that could be a sacrifice, but there's a lot of upside. Your ancestors more than likely left their historical lands, if you will, to go find better opportunity. That's why you landed up where you did for as long as you did.
There's also the possibility you could get your family to move with you. That's completely a possibility. It'd probably take a lot of coaxing, but
again, you got to project these things out, right? We moved back to this area about a year ago and we're planning on leaving again, saving up and making some plans for that. And in the meantime, we've been going back to the church that we had gone to when we lived in this area. And as we're getting reacquainted with people and talking to them, without exception, every single one of them that is even remotely right of center is looking at leaving. They have seriously considered plans of leaving. If even a small fraction of them represent the greater whole, that's a lot of people that are not going to be here very long if they actually follow through on it. And that means you bear that trend out over the next decade or two, when the reason to leave only gets more and more pressing, more than likely these things accelerate. You're going to be surrounded by people that are not those people, and those people are going to have gone anyways. It may be bearable now. Good chances it's not going to be great anyways when all those people leave.
Let's consider the people that can't move, that are stuck in their West Coast city. They're stuck.
What is stuck?
You're under 18, you're saving up, and you're going to move out soon, but you can't right now. I mean, technically you're kind of stuck there, right?
Yeah. I mean, technically we're by choice. We have the money to go. It's more of the, we have a few irons in the fire that we'd rather see to fruition. And there's a certain point in which things get bad enough and we're out of here, but it's not going to happen in the next 6 months probably. So to your point, what do you do with somebody who feels stuck or they can't leave yet? I would say, one, figure out what it requires, what it actually requires to get up and go, and actually make a plan to make that happen. Two, I would start making connections elsewhere. The internet's a powerful thing. Subreddit is a very powerful thing. There's a lot of guys meeting up in person now. You got Disciple House. That might be a good way to get connected with people. Don't think that you have to wait for a year or 2 years or whatever your timeline looks like to start making the connections necessary. Go visit places, especially if you're young and single and you don't have much in the way of attachments. Flights are incredibly cheap right now. You can go just about anywhere in the States for pennies on the dollar compared to what it could be. Go visit, stay there for a bit. If you can work remotely, even better, stay there longer, get a feel for it. Yeah, I would say be serious about looking at those options, because you can change a lot in life, but you really can't change your geographical circumstances where you're at. Those you actually have to move and change.
With any major decision, list out your pros and cons. If you're really considering relocating to like another state, seriously consider what's important to you. Like for me, sunshine is super important. I don't do well in cloudy areas, so I have to have a certain amount of days of sunshine. There's a bunch of other things. Political climate's really important to me as well. Right now, I'm on the West Coast, so the political climate is not great here, but I guess not bad enough at this point to consider moving. And I have one main ire in the fire, the steel Oz's ire in the fire.
You sure you're stealing?
Yeah, I guess
That's
so.
a pretty good one, Oz. Did you come up with that one on the spot?
No, I thought that
Iron
was
in the
just
fire.
I would say that's just an idiom.
Oh,
But sure, I'll take credit for it. Why not? Since we're stealing, apparently. Breaking commandments up in here.
Stealing.
what about in the meantime? You guys are on the West Coast. Do you have a rainbow flag you put on your truck just in case you got to drive through a protest? How do we navigate?
Yeah.
You know, while you live there, you got to deal with people. While you live there, your friends group is going to be super woke, right?
I'd say you definitely have to be conscientious about who you're spending time with. If you're there are other people like you there, and they feel just as strongly, more than likely. And I would say that my friend group here that I've kind of circled ourselves with, if I could bring them with me, I would. There are some really great people who have good heads on their shoulders and they see things rightly. And for various reasons, they're also stuck back here for now. Whether it's legal reasons, job-related reasons, or family-related reasons, they still are making some serious they're making some serious inquiry about whether or not here is the long term for them. And part of that is you want to make good friends with these people in any ways. You want to have kind of your your tribe, if you will, but there's a good chance that a lot of them want to go too. And if you go start a new beachhead somewhere, they might just come with you.
Just want to point out the tribe doesn't actually exist.
I think that we talked about this a little bit last time, but I would say that it exists theoretically.
So you bring your theoretical tribe with you if you can.
Yeah, tribe and your magic internet money. Go start something cool. I was going to ask, there's probably some people wondering. So you move to the Midwest and you say things are better there. Elaborate.
So I moved from California to Kansas. And outside of the traffic, I mean, 2-hour commutes is just normal in California. In Kansas, a 15-minute commute is a disaster. You're just surrounded by more conservative people there. So all of your neighbors will have American flags. All of your neighbors will go to the same local church. It's pretty crazy the amount of Christians you meet in Kansas compared to the amount of Christians you meet in the West Coast. That's the big one, is like-minded people.
I'm going to play again the concerned Christian person here and say, well, shouldn't you have just been a missionary where you were? Jesus didn't promise us easy times or that we get to be around people who think like us. Didn't you just deprive them of the opportunity to hear the gospel? Shouldn't you have just been missional?
Thankfully for me, my mission doesn't stop at my doorstep. You can be missional in other ways than just your neighborhood. I'd make the argument you can be missional by going to the city. You can be missional online, which is something a lot of us have been doing a lot lately. If you're just doing mission in your community, I think you're thinking pretty small.
I would also just add to that, what happened when persecution got bad in Jerusalem in Acts? People loved to just worship the idea that the early church was somehow this like pure, perfect form of church that if we could just recapture, then everything would be great again, which has some pretty high degree of ignorance of church history on it. Anyways, what did they do in Jerusalem when they got persecuted? They fled. And what happened? The gospel came with them. So I think to your point, you may be missional wherever you may be.
What do you guys think about starting a cult, getting a compound set up?
I think that if you look into this little place called Waco, Texas, and you can see how the federal government feels about that pretty readily.
So I got you guys there. I'm Hispanic. I'll be the head of the cult. We'll be untouchable. Nobody's trying to.
I don't know. You're not high enough up the intersectional ladder for wokeism to keep enough heat off of us, though.
I don't know. I've seen the chart. Hispanic is right under gay, so I could play that card too if I have to.
See, if you chop your penis off, then you'll be right at the top. You're basically like an ascended priest at that point, and you're untouchable. If you want to do that, then that you can be the shield.
David Koresh, you just weren't thinking far enough ahead.
That's right. If only David Koresh had been a tranny, then he would not have gotten Waco'd. Man.
What's the demographic of women like out there?
They kick you out if you're not a 7.5.
I've lived in a couple different states, and it's basically the same everywhere else. I mean, you go to any church in the West Coast, Midwest, the South, and you just find a bunch of pretty Christian girls that seem like they're ready to date. I've been married and been dating since I'm 18, so I haven't had the opportunity, but I think your odds are good basically anywhere.
Sounds idealistically optimistic.
Why is it not so good in the West Coast?
Not where I'm from currently. There's just West Coast is not super great.
I've noticed this trend as I've traveled around. There seems to be this like inverse correlation maybe about the pretty on the West Coast. It's like the prettier the girl, the less likely she is to be a Christian. If she's going to church, her friends brought her or part of the college
That's
group.
accurate.
Yeah, so it's like the prettier she is, the less likely she is to be serious about her faith. Whereas as you go more inland, it's kind of like the opposite, where it's like the more pretty she is, generally well put together and feminine looking, the more likely she is to take her faith really seriously, because that's why she's being more feminine in the rest of it. I don't know. It's small observation, very anecdotal so far been my experience.
I mean, I met my wife on the West Coast.
Inland.
It's not that bad over there.
You're from the sunnier part of the West Coast where people eventually, have sunlight on their skin. That does something where people don't want to just live indoors like vampires all the time, which is not optimal for your health, in case anybody's wondering.
It also lowers your testosterone. Boom,
yeah,
sunshine comes out.
Those girls who don't have their testosterone levels up, not doing it for Levi.
The lack of facial hair really kills it for me.
We'll let him have the last word on that one. How about that?
Yeah, that's it. I love you guys. I'll see you later.
Wait, hold on, Levi. How about you pray us out?
Father, thank you for this wonderful day. Thank you for your word. Thank you that you sent your son to die for our sins, Lord. Thank you that your word gives us an example and a framework for how we're to live our lives, or to act, or to talk with people, Father. But you give us boldness to not only share the gospel, but be an example of masculinity to the world. And that through that example, you give us opportunities to share the gospel and connect people with this, how the way your kingdom should be, Lord. I pray that your kingdom come down here on earth, and that we would be able to take part in expanding your kingdom. I pray that anybody listening here, I pray that they would just receive this, Lord, and that you do a work in their heart, and you give them a stronger desire to know you more and to share your word. Help us to navigate these kind of crazy times we're having, Lord, and just keep our eyes focused on you. I ask all these things in the name of your son. Amen.
Amen. Thank you guys for joining us. And if you're looking for some fellowship online, join the Discord. The link is on the Reddit. Osmium Zulu, Levi, they're on there all the time with me too. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
I'm too busy doing wild man energy drink shots, so I don't know.
Okay, guys, don't forget to go buy my product, officialwildmanenergy.com.
Oh my gosh.
Yo, actually, someone on the Discord asked where they could get a link for that. So
Oh man.
there's a test market waiting for you.
Now you just need to launch a wild man energy coin, and we'll be set.
Another
All right, guys.
coin. All right.
All right,
Catch you
later,
later.
guys.